Welcome, everybody. It's my pleasure, as somebody who's been a refugee from the world of journalism for 12 years, to have a panel to find out what's been going on in the past 12 years. But first, I want to thank Bob Hurst, since this is the Hurst Lecture Series. Thank you, Bob and Slate Ed. We're also doing it in conjunction with Colorado Mountain College. This is why we have a product placement deal with them. I have to wear the fleecy. But Carrie Bessnet-Hauser, would you stand up? And John Cunliffe, Rob Gordon. Colorado Mountain College, as you all know, serves 11 campuses in a 12,000 square mile area. And I'll just give you one important fact. It's an open access college for everybody from Rifle to Denver, whatever, in this entire region, which means if you graduate from high school, you get a letter from President Hauser, and it says, you're in. And then they have a president's fund, thanks to a lot of people, that says, and we're going to give you $1,000 for your expenses. It makes it the most affordable college in America. Thank you for what you're doing. Our wonderful media panel, I'm going to let them each tell a little bit about what they do, and I'm going to start with Marty Barron, who bridges the world between old and new media, but somebody who, of course, was the great editor. We've seen him in the movies at the Boston Globe and now runs the Washington Post. So start with you.
Okay, thanks. I'm Marty Barron. I'm the executive editor of the Washington Post. I am the old guy from the old media on a new media panel, apparently. So I'm not sure, a little bit maybe out of place, but we've become very much a new media company growing very fast. I have worked now at the Washington Post for 3.5 years. Before that was the editor of the Boston Globe. Before that, the editor of the Miami Herald. And I've also worked at the LA Times and the New York Times.
All right, can't keep a job, but you're doing well now.
I'm highly transient, apparently. Yes, I am.
Julia.
I'm Julia Turner. I'm the editor-in-chief of Slate. I've been in that role for 2 years, but I've actually been at Slate for 13 years. Came up through the culture side, was the culture editor for a while, and then was the deputy editor for a while before that. Slate is an online magazine of opinion and commentary, and we turned 20 this year. So I'm also an old guy on the new media panel in a way. We're sort of a gray lady of the internet, which puts us in a really interesting position that I'm happy to talk more about later today.
Bryn.
I'm Bryn Musser. I'm the founder of RYOT News. RYOT News is an immersive media company specializing in virtual reality, 360 and augmented reality. We've recently joined forces with the Huffington Post and AOL to start a new chapter in our career.
Hi everyone, my name is Olivia Ma, and I oversee partnerships for the Google News Lab, which is Google's effort to empower innovation at the intersection of technology and media and journalism. And prior to that, I was YouTube's news manager and oversaw a lot of YouTube's efforts around news and information.
I'm Sterling Proffer. I'm the head of growth at Vice Media. I am one of the born and bred Vice employees. I started straight out of school as an intern and worked my way up now, where I look after a lot of our global digital strategy, distribution, partnerships, and how we grow.
Marty, the movie Spotlight, which there's a character, who plays you, by the way?
Liev Schreiber.
Oh, yeah. Well, you're better looking, but yeah.
Well, he's four inches taller, much more fit, and a lot better looking. And I don't mind if when people hear my name, they think of him. It's all right.
Ben Bradley was the only person better looking than the person who played him in the movie, right? But anyway, this is All the President's Men for our generation, and it reminds us a bit of what journalism is all about. Tell us your experience with that movie.
Well, with the movie, look, this is a movie that I never expected to be made. It doesn't have superheroes, it doesn't have action scenes, it doesn't have special effects, and the sex that's in the movie is not typically the kind of sex that you go to see. So there are actually no sex scenes, thankfully, in the movie. But it highlighted an investigation that the Boston Globe did that I launched on my first day at my first meeting at the Boston Globe in 2001. The first stories were published in January of 2002, and then we had about a year and a half worth of coverage about a cover-up, the cover-up of a pattern of sexual abuse within the Archdiocese of Boston, and it obviously went well beyond that to cover up throughout the country and actually throughout the world. I think that it highlights the central purpose of journalism. We have a lot of things that we're supposed to accomplish in journalism, but I think central to our mission is holding powerful individuals and powerful institutions accountable. And that's what we endeavored to do with that investigation. There was evidence of grave wrongdoing on the part of the church, that the cardinal himself in that archdiocese was aware of serial sexual abuse by not just one priest, but many priests within that archdiocese. It turned out to be about 200 priests over 40 years, and that they were essentially engaged in a cover-up. That is, I think, central to the purpose of journalism, is to try to expose that wrongdoing, and that's what we endeavored to do, and that is what we accomplished.
And you went to one of the you go to a lot of the Survivors Network things, but you went to one recently?
Well, I don't go regularly. They invited me. There's a group referred to in the movie called SNAP, the Survivors Network for those who get abused by priests. Not the greatest name, but and it had been a very small and ragtag group before the movie. But since the movie and since our investigation at the Globe, they've acquired a lot of new members. And I was invited a couple of months ago to Chicago to address with the keynote speech their annual convention. And there were 300 abuse survivors at that convention. And it was a remarkable thing because it was gratifying, because I kept getting stopped. People wanted to thank me for the work that the Boston Globe had done in exposing this abuse, but a lot of people were people who said that after the movie came out, but prior to the movie, they had never spoken about their abuse. They hadn't told their friends, they hadn't told their families, they hadn't done anything, they had kept it all secret. But because of the movie, they felt that it was critical that they begin to talk about it, and that it was the first time they had attended the convention of that organization, and they wanted to be active in ensuring that that kind of abuse did not continue within the church or in any other institution.
My last question for you before we move on. That must have cost a lot of money to do a very long investigation like that with a whole lot of people in it. And it was not the type of stories that aggregate eyeballs for clickbait for advertisers. It had to be done because you had the resources of a great paper. Talk about the need for those resources, and now that Jeff Bezos has bought the Washington Post and launched an incredibly strong investigative teams, how do you keep that going?
Well, I do think that that investigation highlights what it takes to do investigative journalism and to do it right. I hope that's one of the lessons that people draw from that movie, is that it does take a lot of time, it takes a lot of effort. It's not glamorous in any way. You're going through documents, you're knocking on people's doors, people are shutting those doors in your face. It is very, very hard work, particularly when it involves an institution that wants to keep this kind of information secret. I would say that over the course of the first year, it probably cost the Boston Globe $1 million to do that work. Given the legal work that was required, we went to court to unseal documents that had been kept confidential by the church that would expose the truth, help expose the truth. And we had to do an investigation, sort of street-level reporting as well. And there were a lot of reporters ultimately involved in that investigation, well beyond the spotlight team that's featured in the movie. And so it's probably $1 million in the first year. So this does require a lot of work. And since it is core to our mission, we want to continue that do that kind of work at the Washington Post, and the Post has always done that kind of work. And fortunately, with the new owner, we do have a guy who has some financial capital, as you may know, which has been very helpful, but he also has brought intellectual capital, and I think both of those are very important to us. And he has spoken quite passionately with us at the Post about how he sees journalism shedding light in dark places, and that democracy dies in darkness, and that the role of journalists and the role of the Washington Post is to make sure we bring wrongdoing to light and to hold public officials and powerful institutions accountable. He himself can be viewed as a powerful individual, and he has said that we should feel free to cover him and his institution, Amazon, the way we would cover any other business executive in any other business.
Julia, enlightened billionaire owners are one business model that may work, but that can't work for everybody. When Slate was founded by Michael Kinsley, and then I think David Plotz took it over, it wavered from being something where you charged, you tried to get consumer revenue, there was a paywall, then you went off of that, now you have a membership model to some extent. How do you see, other than advertising, ways of doing good journalism and getting revenue?
Well, I think we've done a lot of thinking about this over the last 20 years, and you're right. We were founded by Bill Gates, or founded by Michael Kinsley, but under the auspices of Microsoft, so we had our own billionaire who was helping us out at the beginning there. But one thing that we've been thinking about a lot over the last few years is the relationship that we have with our audience. So people come to Slate because they trust Slate to interpret the world for them in a very smart, quick, funny, colloquial, conversational way. And that voice that comes through from our writers in our writing creates this sense of trust that I read the paper in the morning, but then I go to Slate to figure out what to make of what's in the paper. That's been our role from the beginning. We have more competition in that business these days from news shops, from the papers themselves that are starting to do more analysis alongside the reporting that they do. But we still have a strong core group of people who come to us for that, who count on us for that. And we launched 2.5 years ago a membership program, which is distinct from the paywall we launched in the late 90s. What the successful paywalls, I think, tend to be for information that people need to make business decisions of a sort, right? So you want access to market-moving information so you can plan your financial portfolio. You want access to the micro trades within sports teams so that you can control your fantasy team. Those are the companies like ESPN and the New York Times that have had success with harder paywalls. For us, because what we're offering is ancillary and fundamentally a second read, we've had better luck with this model where we provide people with extras, with a better experience, with deeper engagement. So people who are Slate members pay $50 a year or $5 a month. They get bonus segments of the podcast that we do, so sort of an extra 30% worth of content on the podcast that we publish. Most of them run weekly and are about an hour long. They get early access to some of our enterprise reporting. They get a special commenting space where they can chat with other commenters. They get discounts off of live events, and they get these Slate Academies that we do. So this is essentially our version of a online course where we take a really deep dive into some topic that's maybe connected to the news but a little bit more evergreen, and that content is only available to our members. So the first one that we did was a history of slavery. It was a podcast series, interviews with all kinds of different historians of slavery, covering the historiography of slavery and how our understanding of it has changed over the years since you were taught it in school, or maybe since you weren't taught it in school. And that unleashed a whole set of really fascinating and interesting context that our members could use to understand racial dynamics in America and how they were evolving. And we've had a lot of luck with it. When we launched it, we knew there would be a bunch of diehard fans who would sign up over the first month or so. But what we weren't sure about was the longer-term growth trajectory, and we're seeing really steady growth year over year. So we're very hopeful about that.
So, Julia, you're part of a very distinguished line of editors, starting with Michael Kinsley, Jake Weisberg, David Plotz, and then yourself. I may be missing somebody. No?
That's it.
That's
just
it.
us four.
And every one of them added to a voice that has become almost the internet voice, which is intimate, smart, a little bit sassy, but in your case, and in the case of the people who do it right, also well-reported, analytic, and trustworthy. How do you see the voice of the internet evolving? Slate started it. Is it getting out of control now where snarkiness and meanness have replaced what Slate did?
Yeah, I think that our voice is less distinctive than it used to be because a lot of people have adopted the second person address, the kind of casual nature, the use of slang. as a way of connecting with readers. And I think that makes it ever more important for us to retain the immediacy of speaking in the language that people actually use. Sometimes my metaphor for Slate is that it's like an email from your really smart friend. It's like your smart friend's favorite website. It's the person who's kind of the expert interpreting the world for you. But the thing that I emphasize to our journalists in the newsroom is that what we are setting out to do is change minds. And you can only change minds if you're doing that with rigor in your analysis, intellectual honesty, a fair assessment of the other side of the argument that you're making if you're making an argument. And I think in some cases we've dialed back the colloquialness of our language in a few instances to distinguish ourselves from shops that do that less responsibly.
Bryn, I went on RYOT, which was truly amazing, having been with some of the Colorado Mountain College new media people and seeing immersive video, 360 video. Is that the wave of the future? And explain how you produce that type of news.
Sure. First off, thank you for having me here. It's a great honor to be on this panel. Yeah, we've been exploring virtual reality and 360 video for a long time. Maybe by a show of hands, how many people have seen virtual reality here? That's a lot. That's great. It's for those of you who don't know it, you film it with a camera that has multiple cameras all over it. So like a little soccer ball with little lenses everywhere. Stitch it together and then show it in a headset so that you feel like you're standing in the middle of these stories. And if you're looking on your phone, you can move your phone around everywhere. You can move your cursor if it's on a desktop.
But let's make clear that people can go to your site and not put on goggles. I was, until I got a little bit scared, diving off of a cliff from Rio with Olympic divers, and then so you should go to it tonight.
It's all on RYOT.HuffingtonPost.com. Or you can follow us on Facebook. It's RYOT with a Y, RYOT. We've recently launched 360 and virtual reality capabilities in all 15 international editions of the Huffington Post, creating what we think is the largest 360 news network. Some of that is in partnership with Google. For us, I think when you ask about is it the wave of the future, we could debate that for a while, but what isn't debatable is that the way that you are able to consume video on your phone or on your computer changed in the last 6 months because you're now able to look all around or move your phone. And so that to us is a significant moment. And if video is kind of running the internet, then that means that there should be serious investigation for what that means for journalism, for documentary, for news, for music video. Across all of that, there's an opportunity, I think, to create new language, new storytelling techniques, and certainly our journalists who are running all over the world, shooting in this new technology, are very proud that they can be a part of a historic moment to be able to create a new language.
When you imagine your user, do you imagine that person sitting at a desk on a computer or using a mobile device and a smartphone? And if the latter, how does that change journalism?
Sure, I think that right now it's on the mobile phone where we're reaching most people. That's where we see most of our views on YouTube 360 or on Facebook 360. Soon, more headsets will be available as Sony launches a headset and many others launch headsets coming into towards Christmas time. So I think we'll see more adoption. One of the things that's been really interesting is that companies like Oculus, that was recently acquired by Facebook, they've been very surprised at how much video is being consumed. I think people thought this was going to be for video games, and people are seeing that 60% of the content that's watched in a headset is linear videos or 360 videos in that way. So I think that we see it as a step. This is 360 video is a step towards immersive content. Right now, when you put on the headset, you just kind of look around you. In the next couple years, you'll be able to walk around an environment. So for instance, if I'm wearing it, my headset, and I'm in an empty room, and I see this panel, I can walk around this panel and be able to see, eventually interact with the environment. And then, we feel that it's even another step forward will be augmented reality, which we think will have major implications or complete implications on almost everything that we interact with.
Augmented reality meaning?
Augmented reality is overlays. So some of you guys have seen Pokemon Go, I'm sure, is like a consumer version of augmented.
It's not a pretty sight watching all of our members of Society Fellows wandering campus doing Pokemon Go. It's
Right,
like
so Pokemon Go is a very crude version of augmented reality where it imposes a Pokemon on the environment in front of you. But what's coming with augmented reality will be major changes in your cell phone. Televisions, you won't, if it goes in the trends that people are predicting, some say that the last television you bought will be the last television you'll ever buy because you'll be able to just sort of impose all of those screens on your windshield, on your walls, and be able to share it with people. So I think that technology is moving very, very quickly, and 360 video is really just the first step into that.
Olivia, some of us in the journalism trade could never figure out whether Google was our best friend or the most danger we faced. So Google News Labs gets invented and launched by you and your colleagues. How do you address that question, and how do you see yourselves helping, I hope, journalism?
Yeah, so Google News Lab, we're about a year and a half old, and Google News, which probably many of you are familiar with and have used, is a product as part of Google Search, which aggregates news sources, articles from, I think it's over 70,000 news sources from around the world, and clusters those around major news stories. So Google News is probably a product that many of you are familiar with. The News Lab was really created as a way to engage directly with journalists and newsrooms on the latest technologies. So what Bryn was talking about with 360 and VR, around data, around all different types of new storytelling technologies, what the News Lab is really trying to do is say, okay, we at Google have a lot of expertise in emerging technologies. We are building new products. We have a bird's eye view of all of these different areas, whether it's AI or VR, artificial intelligence, machine learning, all of these sort of emerging technologies that are changing industries. What we're really interested in doing at the News Lab is thinking about how those technologies can be applied to news and to journalism. There's many, many teams at Google that work with publishers from a business side, from a product side. We're unique in that we go into the newsrooms and actually work directly with journalists and try and help them understand the latest technology and how that can be applied to the journalism that they're doing every day.
So give us an example of some cool new product that's going to transform journalism.
So actually one that since we were just talking about VR and 360, that is an area that Google has invested a lot in, as well as YouTube. One, just because I just came back from the conventions, both in Cleveland and Philadelphia, we partnered with 6 different news organizations to give them access to the latest VR camera that Google is producing, which actually RYOT has access to as well. It's called a Jump Cam, and it's 17, I believe, GoPro cameras, connected in a single rig with this special software that takes all of the output from those 17 cameras, stitches it together, and creates an actual virtual reality experience. And these are experimental. I mean, these cameras have literally never been used. RYOT is one of the first organizations to have access to these things. That's an example of where we at Google don't even really know what's possible because we need the content creators, we need the journalists to actually
And
show it.
I'll also say we have 2 of those cameras now. We use them all over the world. But one of the things, and it's a little tangential, but our journalists use Google Translate everywhere and all over the world. I don't know if any of you guys here have used the new Google Translate app yet, but you can literally speak English into it, and then it speaks any language that you program it to. So it has transformed the way that we travel, and it's our most now important tool. And so we have conversations with taxi drivers and fixers that are full conversations, no longer sort of looking through a guidebook.
Yeah, the other area that my team is focused a lot on is actually data. So there's a lot of products, but Google has a lot of interesting data about what people are searching for. All anonymized, aggregated, but so we can say for around the election, for example, what questions do people have about Hillary Clinton's policies, or what are people in Florida searching for related to immigration? And we're able to surface these through a product called Google Trends, which is looking across the billions of searches that are happening across Google around the world, and really be able to make that data available to journalists who can then incorporate it into their stories.
Sterling, one of the reasons I love Vice is that it's both the best of old media and the best of new media. I mean, it's very sort of edgy, but it still tells stories, and it's storytelling. It's narrative. It's well reported. Yeah, how do you figure out that mission and the partners that you're trying to pull together for that?
Yeah, I mean, it all, Vice is a media company that has come of age, let's just say, in the last, let's just say like the last decade has seen a real explosion in the growth of what we call new media companies. And a lot of those new media companies are technology first. And in a lot of ways, content ends up being a tool that they use to figure out the business model. And that is just so not what Vice has ever been or ever will be. Vice has always been story first. And so as a result, as we approach stories, as we think about it, our lovely partners at YouTube that we love and have loved forever, when we were first coming to the platform, had a set of best practices. And they said, speak directly to the camera, make it short, maybe a little bit funny, put out a thing every day. And even when we first came to YouTube, we tried a little bit of that. And it just did not resonate because it was not true to who we were, and it was not true to the value that we could add to the ecosystem. So as soon as we started putting up the library of documentaries that we had made in the 6-7 years prior, everything exploded, and we really took off, and we became one of the fastest growing channels on YouTube.
But you became fast growing almost because you were old fashioned. I mean, I remember looking at your refugee story, and I'm thinking, wow, that's something that Don Hewitt would have done on 60 Minutes had he been 100 years younger.
And I think that speaks to the power of the media distribution environment that we have now. Because, it really, it allowed us to do a few things. One, it allowed us to, be able to create really incredible, high-quality content on a cost basis that, let's just say, legacy organizations wouldn't be able to, and then allowed us to distribute it instantly to millions of people around the world. And the fact is that Vice does really have a truly global audience. And the fact that they could all have access to those stories made that really possible. And additionally, just the fact that Vice as a company has been so driven and so self-directed has been really incredible and incredibly rewarding in the sense that, you heard this now, patently disproven notion that young people did not care about news. I think that's been thoroughly debunked at this point. And we're just really happy that we've been able to be a part of making that argument.
I would argue though, because I think since I may have authored those best practices, that you guys came at those similar principles, but in your own way. And I think what the key sort of quality that made Vice successful, but also made vloggers that were sitting in their bedroom speaking to the camera and telling jokes successful, was a sense of authenticity. And that's something that, you can't just take what you see on cable news and put it on YouTube and expect it to be successful. It doesn't translate. What you guys have done with Vice, and I think having sort of the personalities and people like Shane, who's Shane Smith, who would come on and talk to the camera and talk to the audience and create that sense of connection. There's an authenticity there that I think is one of the reasons why Vice is so successful on YouTube.
So Marty, how is all this changing what you do?
Well, we're changing profoundly. I mean, look, we're in a different era, different information era, and the way we view it is that the web has essentially led to a new medium. In the same way that radio was different from newspapers when radio came into existence and television came into existence, it was different from radio and newspapers, different way of communicating with your audience. And so, the web came along, and what did newspapers do? They put newspaper stories up on the web, and that didn't really work very well.
Sort of the old wine and
yeah,
bottles.
right. And then we said, well, that didn't work. Well, let's put them up faster, and that didn't work so well either. And the reality is that we just we have a new medium here, and people are connecting with us in a different way, and so we are developing, I think, a different way of telling stories, one that is more authentic, that where the voice of the writer or the videographer is more evident, and where we use all the tools that are available to us now. And there are a tremendous number of tools. Video is one of them, but interactive graphics is another. Original documents, annotations of those original documents. I mean, there are a whole social media that we can display, a whole range of things, and we use those as part of our storytelling these days. And so we're doing that in every way. We're doing that every day, and we've shown a lot of growth as a result of that. I mean, we have shown year-to-year growth rates of up to 70%.
You're now arriving in the New York Times, right?
Yeah, in the United States, for U.S. traffic, we have essentially the same amount of traffic, same number of visitors every month to our work as the New York Times does.
However, I walk into your wonderful new headquarters with a really amazing newsroom that merges the digital as well as I mean, there's not a print newsroom and a digital. But as you walk into that great lobby, there's a metric board that shows how many clicks each story is getting. Is there a danger to that?
Well, we do have a giant metrics board, and it tells us how we're performing, and it tells us what the most read stories are. It tells us how many people are going from one story to the next. There are more metrics than I keep track of, I can assure you. It's just part of the business these days,
but
is that we need to know that.
some of your headlines have started not on the great stories, but they've started to feel clickbaity. Like,
well, I would disagree with
believe
that.
how many cats are in this video.
No, we have never had a headline like that. I
Okay.
assure you we've never had a headline like that.
Let me get my phone. Sorry, I'm kidding.
You'll be searching forever.
Okay.
But how I define clickbait is that you have a headline that's designed to lure somebody, and then there's no substance behind that headline.
I didn't mean that.
We never have a story like that. We do have headlines that are well written, that do get people to read the stories, which to me is the definition of a good headline, is that it is faithful to what a story is about, but it's written in a way that it gets somebody's attention. And we don't make any apologies for that. And we actually have tools now that allow us to provide multiple presentations on the website and serve multiple presentations to different users. And then we see which one is working the best. We don't actually have humans determine which is working the best. A machine looks at which one is capturing the most attention from our users, and very quickly, that is the approach that takes over. So we do deploy technology on our behalf. Look, we have asked newsrooms in this country with what's happening in this digital environment. They're working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They have to have news out instantaneously when news breaks. We are asking people to work. They need to do video. They have to participate in social media. They have to do a whole range of things now that were never asked of them before. And people are working incredibly hard. And I think that they're working about as hard as they can. Now we have to work smarter. And working smarter means using technology on our behalf. And so we do have a very sophisticated engineering department at the Post, and they have developed a whole set of tools that we can use to amplify our work and to get more people to read it. And what do we want? We want people to read our work, no question about it.
The person who does that best in America, using digital tools to drive people to what they want, is Jeff Bezos at Amazon. What has he brought to the party? What advice has he given you? Give me an example or two of some idea he came up with.
Sure. Well, look, I mean, the first advice, one of the first pieces of advice that he gave us was don't be boring. So we tried to take that to heart.
That's actually a very profound piece of advice.
Right, exactly.
And if you read the Washington Post today, you can see what that means.
Right. We try not to be boring. Look, I mean, he's one of the things that is problematic now is, or has been on the web, is let's say the Washington Post spends 6 months doing a story and we invest a lot of money in it. We post it up on the web. Within 5 to 15 minutes, lots of websites have grabbed that story. They've taken the information that we have. They've distributed it. They've disseminated it all over the web. And they are, in many instances, would get more traffic than we got without spending a dime to do any of that reporting. It's a real problem for news organizations like ours that have invested a lot of money in original reporting. So what they're doing is called aggregating. And we now do more aggregating than we did before, being careful to rely only on trustworthy news sources. But we then layer on our own original reporting on top of that. And that's the only way that we can get to these stories quick enough. If we had to re-report in every detail, every story that was out there, we would be publishing these stories a week from now when everybody's already read it elsewhere.
Sort of like the New York Times.
Sort of like the, well, you know. They, in fact, are doing aggregating as well. In fact, everybody is. And so you have to be careful with that. You have to make sure that these are reliable sources of information. The more sensitive the subject, the more the requirement that you yourself do that reporting and check every last detail. So we certainly have moved more in that direction. But he is also, I think the areas of investment for him have been our newsroom, editorial resources, and we've grown by about 150 people in our newsroom since he acquired us 2.5 years ago. And he's invested in our technology. He's a great believer that we have to absolutely be at the forefront of technology, that we have to be very much in control of our technology because things are changing so fast. So if we want to do something, different, we need to be able to do it ourselves.
Let me do a jump ball for the panel based on something Marty just said a moment ago, which is if you invest a whole lot in the reporting, other people will make the bucks off of it by aggregating. The business model is still based on the aggregation of eyeballs in general. That's the main business model for journalism. Henry Luce, who founded the publication I used to work for, once said that a publication that depends only on advertising revenue and not on consumer revenue is not only morally abhorrent, it's also economically self-defeating. I never knew, since he was a Protestant missionary's son, which was worse in his mind. I suspect the economically self-defeating. Is it abhorrent and economically self-defeating to continue to depend almost solely on advertising revenue? Julia?
I think I fall more in the economically self-defeating camp than the morally abhorrent camp. I think, the influence of advertisers is something that journalists have to guard against, but it's something that we've, as an industry, have a set of practices about. I think we know how to do responsibly. It's a constant thing to watch for. But the bigger challenge is the economically self-defeating part, because the pressures put on journalists by platforms like Facebook, even our friends at Google, mean that the revenues that we get for advertising online are going down. And it's not just the shift from steadier past print revenue to digital revenue, but the fact that the cost that you can bring in, the revenue you can bring in from any individual ad unit online is getting less and less and less. The thing that I find heartening about the current moment, though, is that I think a lot of shops are starting to think less about the mass aggregation of eyeballs as the primary model for what a digital outlet should do, in part because over the last few years with Facebook and access to the kind of data that Marty's talking about, it became fairly easy to publish a set of aggregated stuff, place a lot of bets on the roulette table of Facebook, grow your overall uniques, tell your advertisers you've got 30, 40, 50, 60 million visitors coming every month, sell the concept of those 60 million people. But with everybody pushing the same levers online to achieve that same audience size, you end up having a lot of journalism that's not very valuable, audiences that are not in fact real. I think that's part of what's causing the depression in the revenues that people get. And a lot of places are starting to think really differently about that. I mean, Sterling was talking about Vice resisting the cheap scale model to figure out what it is that they do that's distinctive, what it is that their audience values about what they do, and to really build out a core of users around the world who think Vice is my investigative brand. Vice is who I trust to go figure something out in the world to me, to send very brave reporters into very distant places and come back and speak to me in my language about what's going on there, but with the same rigor that journalists have strived to practice for years. For us at Slate, the way I think about it is how can we tell a story that's different than what people can see somewhere else. How can we focus on something distinctive? How can we be the place that our audience feels like they have to come read to understand what just happened in the world today?
Yeah, Bryn?
Yeah, I would also just add to that, or maybe backing up what Marty was talking about, the moment that we're in, certainly from where we sit, is this incredibly significant moment that's not just put a newspaper on a phone or on a computer. Every one of us in our pockets has a phone that has access to all the world's information, all the newspapers in the entire world we could read right now. And it's got a camera on it that's now mostly a 4K camera, which is about the highest quality camera. So not only can you access all of the world's information, making distribution democratized, but you can also upload your own story and publish it on your own social media or Medium or any of these other platforms. So that means that you have the opportunity for storytelling to also be democratized. And I think the opportunity in it, and also the challenge, is that when you're just seeing content on your phone, when you're just reading a news article on your phone, you don't know the difference between, if you're a young person just accessing news for the first time, there's no way really to tell the difference between an article from a blog or the Washington Post. I mean, I think once you dig in and you see the quality of journalism, of course you can tell. But if you just get it off Facebook or somebody tweets something and you look at it, you used to be able to tell by holding a physical newspaper and seeing that newspaper was high quality. The pictures were beautiful. It was thick. And now, if you're just seeing it on your phone, you really don't have that way to tell the difference. But it also means that there's an opportunity for smaller publishers. I think about with newspapers, if you're the local newspaper in Aspen, you could never compete against the New York Times, because the New York Times could just get more newspapers into the local convenience store in Aspen, but the Aspen paper could never fly their newspapers to the bodega in New York. And now, if you're all accessing it on your phone, it means that you have the chance to equalize that distribution if you're smart about social media, if you get influential people to help push all those things. So I think what it means is that it's more important than ever that we support great journalism, that we make sure that the platforms are also supporting that great journalism. But it also means that there is an opportunity for new voices who never had an opportunity, I think, to be heard or to be read. Now can get out there, and I think that that's an extraordinary thing, especially when you look at the billions of people who are going to be getting online in the next 10 years.
Olivia or Prescott, let me twist the question a little bit as I throw it to you all, which is, journalism has never been more distrusted and more disliked in general in the polls. People just think journalists are, not, they're in it for their own agendas, they're doing bad things. It seems to me one cause of that is we aren't producing journalism that requires people to pay for it. In other words, if we were disciplined by having to have customers willing to buy our product, we would then have to produce a product that was more trustworthy. Is there any way to get consumer revenue in this day and age and produce the type of journalism that people will pay for? Or is that me being 20th century?
I don't know I'm the best person to speak to that. I mean, I think Google's services are free to consumers. So our model is very much people come to Google for information.
But wait, let me push on you. Google News Lab could, if it wanted, say that in every Google browser there's a coin purse, and we're going to let people pay for the articles. This may not be in Google's interest because you just want everything out there so people can get to it. But if you decided to embed, either through a blockchain model or any type of coin model you wanted, a way for people to pay for the stories or music or poems they were accessing, you could change journalism more than anybody else.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting idea, this idea of micropayments and sort of, building in that expectation. Like we were chatting about this last night around how Apple did that with music and how iTunes really changed that expectation, or just even the idea that something has value and that you pay for it. And I think that was more or less successfully done in music, because it was sort of a frictionless experience to just be able to log on to your iTunes and easily buy a song, 99 cents, not a big deal. I think that type of model, it's being experimented with. I think there are sites.
So are you going to let Apple beat you to the punch at Google?
I don't know. I can't speak to whether or not. I mean, I think there have definitely been. I think experiments. There are companies that are trying this. A company called Blendle out of Europe that's actually had quite a lot of success with this micropayment. Not quite the 5 or 10 cents idea, but the 99 cents. I think that Google is starting to experiment with a subscription model on YouTube with a newish service called YouTube Red, which is a monthly subscription. Now, it's a little bit different from what you're talking about, but the idea is you pay for this, it's an ad-free experience, and then part of the revenue goes to the content creators that are uploading content to YouTube. So far the results of that are good. So I think that we kind of went to this wild, wild west model when the internet was kind of blowing up and all the content was free. Now we're sort of moving back into where is there's a balance here. I think we all agree that not everything should be behind a paywall. We want to make sure that everybody has access to information that can improve our democracy. But there is stuff that takes a lot of work, to Marty's point, that takes time, investment, that really deserves to sort of be financially supported.
Do you want to?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's a question of what's being sold fundamentally. And I think that in a world where subscribers or people are actually paying to the content provider, then they're saying that there's some exchange of value, and then there's a more direct accountability. As opposed to in an advertising model, it's not the content that's being sold, it's actually the audience that's being sold to the advertiser. And Vice doesn't have any direct-to-consumer product, but if you actually think about it, what Vice has been able to do very successfully is license its content to multiple different platforms around the world. And as you think about the growth in mobile devices, the growth in video consumption, the growth in all the different areas in which the media landscape is evolving, once they build those platforms, the question is, well, what are they going to actually fill those platforms with?
Sterling, let me just, and then I'll get to Marty. Sterling, if you are licensing your content like that, do you see Vice as being a brand, or will some of the distribution channels be the brand, or will the journalists be the brand?
Yeah, well, I would say that there are several video producers who, in search of scale, and who are in search of scale almost for its own sake, or only for the sake of developing more advertising inventory to sell, end up giving their content away for free. And in doing so, they end up ceding a lot of the control of their brand. They end up ceding a lot of the control of the way that their brand is positioned, the way that it is promoted. And Vice has never pursued scale for its own sake. And so we've always been incredibly thoughtful about our distribution. So as we think about any deal that we may do with any different distributor, those deals are very considered in a way that we are always very thoughtful about our brand, the maintenance of that, and the development of that through those deals.
Sorry, Marty, you were about to say.
Well, I would say it's not really true that people won't pay. There are many people who are paying for journalism on the web. So the Wall Street Journal has long had a pay model, and there are many people, millions of people, who pay for access to the Wall Street Journal. The New York Times then followed with a pay model. People said that it was early on. All the pundits said that's a crazy idea. It turned out not to be a crazy idea. They have, I think it's about 1.4 million subscribers. ESPN. For certain services on ESPN.
And you do 10 articles a month?
No, ours is 5. So, and we were a latecomer to the pay model, and so we've had a lot of catching up to do. But I think we're showing very good growth, and we're happy with the progress that we've made. We're not at the New York Times level. I won't tell you what level we're at. We're not permitted to say so, but I think we're making really good progress. I mean, one of the things for us was that, one of the things that Jeff did after he acquired us 2.5 years ago was completely change the strategy for the Washington Post. We had become a news organization that was described as being for and about Washington, fundamentally a regional news organization with the recognition that we were in Washington. Of course, we were going to cover government and politics and things like that. But when Jeff came in, he said he didn't think that was a model that would work, that we had an opportunity and an imperative to become a national and even international news organization. And by the way, we also happen to have a brand that was known around the country, although people may not have actually, they knew of the Washington Post because of Watergate and things like that, but they may not have actually experienced the Washington Post. And around the world, people knew about it. And when people around the world talk about the United States, they often say Washington. So we had a great name to leverage into being national and
But
international.
let me push back on your subscription model, which is great. And I subscribe to the three you mentioned. New York Times, Washington, I believe in paying for it, or Wall Street Journal. Actually, Kathy subscribes to the Washington Post, and I use her subscription, but I think that's legal, right?
It's okay, it is legal,
We
yes,
tend to
you
share
can use-
computers,
yes,
too.
you may.
But there are many times like there was a good article somebody said in the Houston Chronicle.
Yeah.
I don't want to subscribe to the Houston, or the FT does this to me. Why don't you go to a model like we used to have? Go ahead.
Right. Well, there are models that are developing. I mean, this is not settled business here, okay? This is
But
there
I'm
are
talking about
new models.
subscription and paper.
There are new
Yeah.
models emerging, okay, so that you might be able to acquire a subscription to a bundle. It could be a very large bundle. It could give you access to hundreds of the news organizations, and you would pay a fee, and then the news organizations would be compensated based on whatever metrics apply. So it could be the number of people who are reading them. It could be the amount of time they spend. It could be other metrics for engagement, things like that, and that they would be compensated based on that. Those things are in the works. People are contemplating that kind of approach, and we don't know exactly what the business model for media is going to be. All of us are experimenting with new things in new ways. We're trying a lot of things. Nobody can say today, at least I don't think there's anybody who can say today, this is what the future of media is going to be. This is the model that's going to exist. Frankly, if anybody, and there are going to be a wide variety of models out there depending on what kind of media institution you are. And at any point where anybody comes up with a clearly sustainable economic model, all of the rest of us are going to copy that right away.
Yay.
And that hasn't happened yet.
Let me open it up. Right? Yes. Oh, many questions. I should have started early. You, and then back there. We'll go in that order.
So I have a question.
ID yourself if you don't mind,
Hi, I'm
since
Richard
we don't.
Steinberg, and I actually have a question
We
for
don't like
Sterling.
anonymity on the web these days.
I have a question for Sterling. So how do you respond to some of the critics, I call them the old boy networks, the CNN, the CNBCs, who, let's say, are a little skeptical or critical of the new age of media? The second part of the question, is it because they're threatened, they're worried about revenue? They're just very critical about the new age of media.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's not necessarily evenly applied across everybody that may work for one of those companies, but of course there may be those within those companies who have something to say. I mean, there is a universe where, from a revenue standpoint, that dollars are finite. And I mean, especially if you think about the fact that 85 cents on every new dollar going into digital is going either to Google or to Facebook, that every other independent media company is, ultimately chasing that remaining 15 cents. Wow. Additionally, attention is finite. And as attention is shifting from TV to digital, from desktop to mobile, and from, frankly, from publishers to platforms, it's an intense environment, and there are a lot of opinions. And I think that our job is to make sure that we keep our head down and focus on what we do best and on serving our users in the best way we can.
Can I actually say, though, I think the amount of scorn towards new enterprises in journalism is way down from what it was 5 or 7 years ago. I think generally people practicing it recognize that shops that are brand new, shops that have been around for decades, that everybody's trying stuff. You see a cool experiment that worked that you want to copy at all kinds of shops of all sizes every day. You see a failed experiment that you can admire the idea behind it. You see you see bad ideas where you think, okay, something's not going right there. But I think the sense that all of us feel a responsibility to keep experimenting with the particulars of how you can do journalism well on the web and make it economically sustainable make us more likely to admire and root for each other at this point than to sneer at newcomers.
And I would just add that CNN, since you mentioned it, and I have no interest in CNN one way or the other, the CNN is a powerhouse on the internet, by the way. It is a huge factor on the internet. They have a very good site. They have a huge amount of traffic. They've just built up a large political unit, and they're doing very good work. And so they're not, I don't think that they disdain the internet. They're actually a major participant in the internet these days.
Yes, I'll work my way back. We'll try to get a lot of people in. Quick question.
I'm Pat Latore. This question may start with a piece of data that's really dated, but I was told the print media used to have to write to a 7th or 8th grader to be communicative. In other words, the audience level of comprehension required a certain allocation of what it was that you could say that could be interpreted.
Marty?
Excuse me. That may not be true.
No, I've been in this business for 40 years. I've never been told to do that. And it's evident from the stories that that's not the case. In fact, there are many words I have to look up from time to time. And I wish I didn't have to. And so that's really not the case. I mean, I certainly think we should write in a way that people understand, that large numbers of people understand, and not write as if we're writing a paper for a postgraduate thesis. But nobody, I'm not aware of any requirement to write at a 7th or 8th grade
that
level.
wasn't the question. It was trying to establish a
I
Okay,
see.
well, while we get to the
So
question.
here's the question. The print media, it seems to me, in relationship to a way of communicating, is quite different than the new dimensions that we're seeing on this stage. And I'm wondering if you think about the person who's receiving that information, whether it be a child or an adolescent or an adult, are we going to be communicating in such a different way in relationship to the way they're taught, the way they learn, the way they think, that this is going to change everything in relationship to, let's say, the more traditional print media?
Yes, I think it's, as I suggested, this is a different medium, all right? So it requires a different idiom and a different way of communicating. And yes, people are absorbing information. Younger people are absorbing information in a completely different way than people of my generation and your generation. That is certainly true. It's more visual, which is why all of these folks have been able to create a growing business, and it uses all these other tools that we have, interactive graphics and original documents and social media and all these sorts of things which are not characteristic of the print media. So organizations like ours, which have a legacy print business, when we're on the web, we have to be like the web. We can't just be a print.
Yeah, the two women in the aisle in either order.
Yeah, Eileen Folman, I am wondering, with respect to the graduate schools of journalism, how much of the new media is being generated there, and vis-a-vis those of you who are actually practicing it, and how much do you interact back and forth with those schools to further refine the new media that they might be generating and that you might be generating?
We at Google, we actually work a lot with journalism schools. My team in particular, the News Lab, has a big mission and focus on training and development, and that a lot of that has to do with going into these journalism schools and helping to develop curriculum that's around the latest technologies. So to us, we see, the journalism students are the future of the industry, and they're oftentimes at the cutting edge of the newest tools. And they're, we mentioned Snapchat earlier, some of these newer platforms that frankly even I am not fluent in. A lot of times journalism students are the ones that are sort of defining what these future trends and mediums are going to be. So for us at Google, we definitely work a lot with journalism schools.
And I'm just going to add one plug, which is when this is over, I want you to go see Carrie Bessenet-Hauser, who is sitting there, because Colorado Mountain College is now doing a whole school of new media, and it's not supposed to just be, journalistic elite, but whether it's marketing, advertising, everything else, learning these new tools is something that community colleges and others should be doing. Yes, ma'am. We won't go there. Yeah, go ahead.
Hi, Siobhan Farry. Given the scale of, the global nature of news, the importance of global issues, how do you view the role of the foreign correspondent and the foreign desk? As I understand it, they've been brutally cut back across the world. So what do you feel is your responsibility in giving people perhaps what they need to know versus what...
Let me let
feel they
Sterling
want to?
take that one, but because Vice has more foreign correspondents and...
Yeah, I mean, the way that Vice has grown over the years is we've established local offices that are completely self-sufficient, and they are so endemic to their own communities that oftentimes only recently have we really scaled the global awareness of the company. But up until that point, a lot of people in each country thought that Vice was originally from that country. So that came from smart hiring, that came from finding great people and allowing them to develop the business without giving them a McDonald's franchise book and saying just follow these rules and then you can stay
So,
open.
Bryn, do you want to talk about Ariana's plan for world domination?
No, I mean, I'll take on a different. I mean, Ariana's been. I think what Ariana did so well is create a blogging network whereby people can publish their own stories. So what we're working with her now is doing the same thing and this is part of a larger discussion around citizen journalism, but what we've been working on for a long time is empowering journalists and activists, filmmakers all over the world with cell phones to shoot video on, and now 360 cameras. So, I mean, I think that the tools, back to that point, the tools that people have access to now is making it now capable whereby people can capture incredible footage that would have taken, a camera crew and Wolf Blitzer to show up with to tell that story in the past.
As far as the Post is concerned, we have actually just added to our foreign staff. So we added 3 additional people to our foreign staff, including 2 who are correspondents overseas. One who's based in Brussels, and the other who's going to be based in Istanbul. We hope, if he's accredited there, to cover conflicts and things like that. So we have 20 foreign correspondents overseas, and we're very committed to it, and we think it's absolutely critical that we be eyewitnesses to the events around the world, which have an enormous impact on us. In addition to that, over the last year, we've created what we call the Washington Post Talent Network, which are a network of freelancers, many of them journalists who have retired, some who are journalists who were fired, but only for downsizing reasons, people who are maybe underemployed, things like that. That's around the country and then around the world, and also doing video. And we have over 2,000 people in that network now. They've all been vetted by our editors, and they are available and often deployed to do work for us, and we now have a network of people overseas. So when there was the terrorist attack in Nice, we had somebody within an hour of Nice who was able to get there right away to start reporting, a very good journalist who was able to get there right away to start reporting that, and then our correspondent who was in Paris was able to get there later.
Yes, here and then, yeah, sorry. Yeah.
Great, thank you. My question is a national security question. Don't be surprised. All of you know what people are looking for. You know where they're coming from and what they're asking. And most inquiries are just nice, benign inquiries. But occasionally you have some bad people looking for information. How do you deal with the government agencies, the 3-letter agencies that contact you and want to know where people are, what they're looking for, and where they're coming from?
I've never experienced that. We don't have any agencies coming to us to ask where people are and what they're asking for. I mean, first of all, there aren't that many people who ask us for sensitive information, and secondly, I have not had a 3-letter agency or an agency with more letters ever ask us to provide that kind of information. So.
Has anybody ever felt the need to, I mean, Google faces this.
I honestly, I'm not trying to dodge it. I can't speak to that. It's not my area. I mean, I know that somebody at Google could answer that question, but unfortunately it's not me.
I'll just mention that I just retired from the government, and I was in an environment where a lot of people were looking for information from our websites, and the three-letter agencies really wanted to know that information, and we just would tell them, unless it was a critical issue like someone searching for mustard gas information or where the national stockpiles are, we just said you have to subpoena us, even though we were a government agency.
Yes, sir. And then I think I'm skimping on the back. I'll try to get there.
This question is for everybody but the Washington Post, because they're easy to do stuff.
They're what?
I'm impressed with the fact that 2 lectures we've had now, you guys sitting there and one on podcasts before. Now here's a whole bunch of new people coming into the world with new ways to communicate. It's easy to value Washington Post. You look at their profits at the end of the year. You look at how many people they consider as people who read their newspaper. It's easy. At the end of a year, even Slate, who's been here around for 20 years, has to come to the end of the year and say to themselves, what have we accomplished? How do we make judgments? Because we certainly aren't talking about a profitable operation or lots of money. So how do we make judgments as to our success and our business model? All of you must have that question at the end of the year. I'd be interested to know how you respond.
Well, I'm not going to speak to Slate's profitability, but I don't think your assumptions are correct. And we are trying to be a sustainable business. We're not trying to rake in. The primary purpose of Slate is not to make money, but it is very important to me that we find a business model that allows us to sustainably make enough money that we can continue to do the work that we do covering the world. And these new styles of journalism, these new models, podcasting, all of the other tools that we're playing with, they're not just experiments in how to talk to young people, and actually the age range of people who consume these different forms varies a lot. But there are ways that we can help solve that problem. I mean, podcasting, to take just one example, which Slate does a lot of, and we've just started a podcasting company over the last year, is both a very satisfying editorial experience. It's something that, for the people who like it, it's an on-demand medium. They find it to be good company throughout the day. The story I always tell about podcasting is that I now listen to podcasts in the shower. I just put my iPhone in a Ziploc bag, which you can, oh yeah, it's a really good hack. You can just tap the screen through the Ziploc. And if I now find myself having to take a shower without a Ziploc bag and without podcasts, I'm like bereft. And I tell that story sort of because, no, I don't listen to the whole thing. Then you take it out onto the sink and brush your teeth. But keep, the thing that's really striking to me about podcasts is you have this relationship with the hosts who have an informal, typical demeanor. You get to trust them. You're putting a media experience into a chunk of time where there wasn't typically a media experience. So when people talk about mobile, they're typically talking about you're sitting on the subway or you're waiting in line at Starbucks, but then you start walking or going somewhere or you lose signal and you have to cease the media experience. But podcasting, because it's just in your ears, you can multitask. And that means that there's a whole new set of attention that can be monetized, and we're having very good luck selling ads against our podcast to the degree where we've started a whole business against it.
Let me, the woman there, and then I'll promise to get in the back there. I'll get the two of you. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm Erin Gogolak. Thank you all for being here. It's very interesting. In this new media world, how do you possibly have the time and the finances to fact check as old school media was?
Nobody seems to be rushing to answer that question. Interesting. Why would I step in?
When you put something up, is it as well fact-checked as it was in print?
Well, I think that we have really high-quality reporters, and so they know that before they post something, they're supposed to make sure that it's right. There are greater risks today, there's no question about it, largely because of the demand for speed. Now why do we put up things so quickly? It's because if we don't, somebody else will, and they will get the audience and we won't. So, and speed is measured in milliseconds now. We have to put out an alert immediately that something has happened, and people expect that from us now. If we're not there, they go somewhere else for source. They go to CNN's operation, or they go to the New York Times, or they'll go somewhere else.
But the silver lining is that you can correct it more quickly.
We can correct it, but that's not the ideal thing, is to go correct it. I mean, we've had a couple of websites that recently have announced the death of someone. It's probably not good to have a scoop that you have to retract along those lines. So that wasn't us. But there are greater risks. And I worry about that all the time. And then the other risks that we have is just the available resources within the newsroom, particularly for copy editors, okay? So in the past, you'd write a story, it would go to the copy desk in a very methodical way would go through it. They would ask a lot of questions. They might call you, the reporter, at home at night, or the reporter would be there and they would go through it, that sort of thing. They would spend time looking up the spelling. They would spend time looking up the various facts. They would go to actual books at the time. We used to use them, things like that. And now we have to post very quickly. So I do think that the error rate tends to be higher. But I'm not sure, and I worry about that a lot, but I think for the most part we're doing good, the reporters are doing a good job of checking things, but I worry about the risks that we're undertaking every single day. It's a hugely competitive environment.
Yeah, in the yellow, yes. Yeah.
Hello, I'm Caleb Sussman. This is for Mr. Barron. And even though I'm young and possibly an anomaly for my generation, I enjoy getting a copy of the print newspaper every day and reading through it on the subway on my way to school and even at school. So how do you feel, or how do you find your way still, making the print paper with the overhead pressure of internet paper and internet news? How do you just keep the tried and true business running?
Right. Well, first of all, thank you for reading the print newspaper. I hope cloning has developed to a higher state, and we can take a sample and create more of you. But that's great. But first of all, not just for reading the printed newspaper, but obviously for being so heavily engaged with the news. Look, we still have a large readership of the print newspaper, and while that circulation is declining, as it is for just about every newspaper in the United States and the entire developed world, those are very loyal readers, and they're willing to pay very good money for that newspaper, and they really want a physical newspaper, and they will even tolerate price increases, and in recognition that we need their money in order to do that. It's very expensive to deliver a printed product to their home first thing in the morning. So we make sure that the printed newspaper has the highest quality possible, and we do not give it short shrift by any means. And because we are called sort of a legacy news organization, and we have this legacy of a printed product, there's still a deep reservoir of affection for the printed product within the Washington Post. Maybe too much.
Yeah.
So our risk is not that we have too little affection for the printed product. Our risk is that we may have too much affection for the printed product. But nonetheless, that we make every effort to make sure that printed product is really high quality, and that those loyal readers that they remain loyal readers of the printed product.
Way back there, I know I've been waiting to get you.
Hi, my question is related to media. New media is sort of thought to be a factor in the intense partisanship and divisions sort of in society. People find media to agree with their position, and it only makes them more convinced of their position. So what do you see as a responsibility, or what are you doing in terms of thinking about promoting civil conversations in society? And
Very, very good question, sir. And nobody's leaning forward to answer it. Yeah, go ahead, Bryn.
We started, my background is a humanitarian, and so I launched RYOT 4 years ago.
Explain, you were in Haiti for the earthquake.
Yeah,
right?
I was in Haiti. I'd lived there for 3 years after the earthquake in 2010, and I built RYOT in my tent behind a children's hospital that I was volunteering at there. And I built it because I was frustrated at news not being actionable. So when we actually built RYOT, it was a news website that every story had an action. So when you read the news, you could do something about it, which at the time I think was controversial, and we used to get in a lot of trouble about it because people would say that it's not right to tell people what they should do after reading an article. But I think that our readers were coming to RYOT because they didn't want to be depressed by what was happening in the world, but instead they wanted an opportunity to partake in the world. And if they were able to communicate across these places with social media and cell phones, they wanted that from news too. And so, we've always tried to be on the right side of history and compassionate and supporting peace and understanding and respect and justice and all of those things. But I don't think we've ever tried to paint both sides of the picture. And I certainly, we didn't want to isolate anybody. But we're a little shop, and so for us, we want to make sure that it's known what our beliefs are, because it's in a fragile time that we're in, and it's an important time.
Is technology balkanizing the media in such a way that we've become more polarized?
Yes, for sure. It's a huge problem. And, we live in an era of choice, and choice is a great thing. And represented up here are a lot of different ways that people can get information, and I think that's really, and what we have here are responsible players in the media field. So people are gravitating toward sites and broadcast outlets, cable outlets, that affirm their pre-existing point of view. And so that is an issue, but there's an even deeper issue, and that is, and a more concerning issue, and that is that there are internet sites that are propagating information, so-called information, that is absolutely false. These are absolute fabrications. So you have a large number of people in the country, about a quarter, who believe that the president was not born in the United States, that he was born in Kenya. You have a large portion of the population that believes he's Muslim when he's Christian. You have a large portion of the population that now believe that there were 3,000 Muslims cheering the collapse of the World Trade Center tower when there is no evidence that that actually occurred. You have a large percentage of the population. There's a guy who runs an internet site in Austin, out of Austin, called Infowars.com, and also has a prominent radio show, who contends that many of these mass killings that we've seen, too many, were actually hoaxes, that they were choreographed by the administration in order to increase support for gun control and even gun confiscation. And it's not a small portion of the population that believes this, it's a large portion of the population that believes these various conspiracy theories and things like that. And it is very corrosive to our democracy because, Senator Daniel Patrick Moynihan, the late senator, used to say, you're entitled to your own opinions, but you're not entitled to your own facts. Now people believe they are entitled to their own facts, and they have their own set of facts. And when you have a situation where, in our country, where we don't just argue about the analysis of the situation or the prescription for solving a problem, we disagree on the core facts. We can't even agree on what happened yesterday. How do you have a civil society? How do you have a democracy in that kind of environment? And it is for all the challenges that we face in our industry, in my view, there is no greater challenge than this emergence of what many people are calling essentially a virtual reality that people can live in that is divorced from actual reality.
And I think the thing that's also really troubling about it, I completely agree that it's the most pressing problem, and I think the other thing that's really difficult is that you would imagine that as journalists you could shed light on that problem by further reporting of the truth, but there are studies that show that that does not actually have the right effect, that reading and enforcement of a fact that is not the opposite of the version of the truth that you believe just causes you to double down in your own belief. And I think we've seen this particularly in reporting around science and vaccines on the web, where there's a whole ton of conspiracy theories about it. I just was reading another one that some crazy friend of mine posted about Zika and genetically modified mosquito. They crop up all over the place. And the temptation for the media, I think, is to go into this posture that I kind of think of as science bully mode, to sort of say like, another stupid person said a stupid thing about vaccines, and to kind of flex the muscles of big science, and you can actually get a lot of traffic going rah rah big science and saying, oh, what a stupid GM mosquito theory. But that does not, I think, have the effect of changing the minds or helping persuade people who are on the borderline or really trying to sort out the truth of these matters. So the question of what the right journalistic posture is, if it's not just reporting the truth about things, is the thing that bedevils me.
Mm-hmm. All right, who has a great last question? You do. It's got to be a big, broad, wonderful, inspiring question. Pressure is on you now.
How can you ensure that you're not politically biased one way or the other, like some,
Right. All right, I'm going to let every one of the panelists talk about that, and if you don't mind, I'm going to broaden it slightly, which is how do you ensure you're not politically biased, or is it okay to say in this new day and age, I'm coming at it from a viewpoint? And you want to
I think
start with Sterling?
Yeah, I think the most important thing at any media institution is about transparency and about disclosure. And I think that, with that, you are able to establish a common and confident ground from which that conversation can take place. And I think that there's been obviously a dramatic rise in first-person reporting, storytelling of any kind, whether it be someone behind a set of keys or someone holding a phone in the middle of a protest. And I do believe that the collective desire for information around that and for first-person perspective is only increasing. But, as Marty mentioned, that simultaneously allows for active disinformation to spread. And so ultimately, the job of some media institutions, whether they be publicly funded or otherwise, to call it like they see it is very important. And the best that can happen is for other journalistic institutions to do the best they can at clearly communicating and establishing that trust with their audience.
I think from Google's perspective, we're not a news organization. Google's mission, however, is to organize the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful, which is not dissimilar from many news organizations. But because many, many people around the world come to Google for information, we absolutely cannot have any type of bias whatsoever. And I think that, what you see on Google Search, what you see on Google News, it's algorithmically generated and is meant to show whatever news articles, the algorithm, surfaces.
Wait, real quick, Olivia,
Yeah.
Can algorithms have biases?
Well, I think, right. I mean, obviously there is a human being who's creating those algorithms, and I think that's something that has been a healthy topic of discussion and a very valid one, which is that every algorithm is a series of choices, but there are literally hundreds of signals going into Google search results. I mean, it's not just it's not a simple matter by any means. In fact, it's so complex and it changes every week. So we can't even describe what all the different factors are that go into it. But it's many, many. So I think that it's important that when you come to Google, you are able to get information across many, many different perspectives, whether that be different news organizations with different political leanings, or to Sterling's point, first-person perspectives. If you go on YouTube, I mean, I think we are meant to be a portal for the world's information, and that can mean a lot of different things.
Yeah, I'll just add on to Sterling's point too. I mean, I think transparency for us is the most important part. People who come and read our articles or watch our films know that we have a political bias. We're not the Associated Press, nor we're not Reuters, we're not Google. In that way, we don't want to be. And so I think as long as we're transparent about that and people know what they're coming to get, and our partner is the Huffington Post, which also I think is very open with its political beliefs, and we're proud of that.
I think there's a difference between being biased in the way you practice journalism and having opinions and viewpoints. And so the Slate position has always been that we strive to be fair as we possibly can in our reporting and also in our analysis and the rigor of our analysis, but that we definitely come from a perspective, that perspective will be evident to our readers. You know, Dahlia Lithwick, our Supreme Court correspondent, weighs in on what the justices say, but it's, you know, she also writes very vigorously about what she believes, and it's no surprise to people when she critiques Alito, and makes no bones about it. And we actually have been in the habit of publishing a list of everyone on staff who they're voting for before Election Day, on the theory that, you know, if you should know where we're coming from.
So I don't think that we will ever escape allegations that that we suffer from political bias, because that's just the nature of the environment at the moment, particularly during a presidential campaign. But I don't even, and we do have layers of editing where people act as internal checks on others if they detect bias in stories, and we endeavor to guard against it, and it's part of our code of ethics and part of our principles at the Post. The way that I see it is, our mission is that we need to be honest, honorable, and fair in our reporting. And fairness involves being open to what people are saying, listening to them closely, giving them a hearing, and a fair hearing. But ultimately, we do the reporting, and then we have an obligation to tell people in a very straightforward way what it is we found, what the evidence actually shows, and not to pussyfoot about it, and not to be timid about it, and to tell people exactly what the evidence shows and tell it to them straight. And when we talk about fairness, my view is, let's be fair to the public too. And that's part of being fair to the public, is telling them in a straightforward way what the results of our reporting were, what we found, and so I believe that that's absolutely central to our mission. I don't think that we should shy from that, and I don't think that we should shy from it simply because someone, as a result, may accuse us of political bias.
Sterling, Olivia, Julia, Bryn, Marty, thank you all very much. Thank you very much.